Hello, thank you for joining the Native American Agriculture Fund's first 2020 RFA webinar. We're so happy that you took time today to learn about our grant process, and we are excited to share with you. Before we start, we'd like to give a few more minutes for others to join us, so we ask for you to wait a little bit with us to around 2:05 Central Time. Thank you for your patience. We'll be back in a bit. Again, thank you everyone for joining us. We are going to wait just 2 more minutes to allow more people to log on, and then we'll get started. Hello, welcome to the Native American Agriculture Fund 2020 Request for Applications webinar. This is the first of 5 webinars that we will hold throughout the open period. The other dates are on Thursdays as well, all starting at 2 p.m. Central Time. Those are today, April 9th, April 23rd, May 7th, May 21st, and May 28th. All of the webinars will cover the same material, with the exception of the last webinar being reserved for technical issues only. At any time during this, if you have trouble connecting, please reach out to us. You can call us at 445-6226. Again, that's 479-445-6226. Or you can email us at grants@nativeamericanagriculturefund.org. At any point, you can use your GoToWebinar control panel to send us a question, and we will take questions at the end of the panel. You go to the control panel and click the area that says questions. You type it in there and it comes to the staff here. We'll make a note of it, and when we finish all the slides, we'll have our CEO, Janie Hipp, to answer your questions live. If we don't get to your question or we don't fully answer it, please follow up or certainly call us or send us an email. We want to make sure that you have clarity on your issue. So with that, I'd like to introduce our first speaker, Janie Hipp. She is the CEO of the Native American Agriculture Fund, and she's going to walk us through the RFA.
So, Carly, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, great. And I'm assuming everyone else can as well. If you ever have problems in hearing me throughout this webinar, then just post something in the chat or questions box, and Carly and I will do actually Carly will do technical assistance, because anyone who knows me knows that I'm technically challenged. So anyway, it's really good for all of you all who have called in today. I wish I could see all your faces, and I wish I could hear all your voices. It brings us a lot of joy to hear you and to see you. But I wanted us to start off. I just wanted to say a few words before we get started. We, like you, are struggling with adjusting our own activities and our own lives to the COVID-19 pandemic. We're painfully aware of how it is affecting every one of our own communities as well as yours. We were already in the process of preparing to do a release of the request for applications April 1st. And we decided our staff all had to start working remotely, as many of you have as well. And we all had to start taking measures to protect our communities and our elders and our friends and our family. But we never veered from the important nature of us keeping on track and making sure that this 2020 request for applications was launched on time. It was not delayed. We felt it even more important that we stay on track and get this process up and running, your ideas in the door, so that we can deploy resources as soon as humanly possible. And we so appreciate you taking part today and being interested in submitting an application to us. We totally understand. We're not living your lives every day, but we deeply understand, all of our staff do, and our trustees, what you're going through, and many of us are going through the same thing. But please understand that I'm gonna walk through the slides. Tony's gonna then take over towards the end and walk through getting into the software system. But please understand that you can reach out to any of us through the email or telephone number that's posted on our website or within this slide deck, because we're here for you. If we can figure out how to help you make it a little bit easier at your end to get your application in, then we will bend over backwards to do that. So with that, I also wanted to say that we are all of the opinion that now more than ever, it is very clear to us that rebuilding and reinvigorating Native food systems and simultaneously supporting Native farmers and ranchers and fishers and food champions and food people in all of our communities is actually more important now than it ever has been. And we are committed to that journey with you, and we can't wait to see what proposals you bring in the door for us to look at. So with that, please just reach out anytime in any way that makes sense to you, and we're here for you. So I'm just going to walk through some if you've been through this before, then some of these early slides are going to feel repetitious to you, but there's a lot of folks that are reaching out to us now in response to the application going live that we have never heard from before. And so if you'll bear with me, I'm going to go through just a few background slides, and then we're going to dig into the actual application process itself. So many of you already know that NAAF is a private charitable trust that was created from the final Cypre Funds settlement of the Keep Siegel litigation. You can go on our website. That slide, that URL right there will take you straight into the history of the Keep Siegel case. The NAAF Board of Trustees executed and launched the trust agreement that forms the basis of NAAF in July 2018. If you click on the link in this next set of bullets there, then you can actually go straight to the trust agreement. The trust agreement's on our website all the time. I really encourage all of you to take the time to read it, because it literally sets in motion what NAAF is, how it's organized, what its requirements are as came out of the settlement of the Keep Siegel litigation. NAAF as an organization will expire 2038, and so this was created as a 20-year private charitable trust, launched in July 2018. It will expire in 2038. So the funds that make up the corpus of the organization, of the fund, will be spent down during the next during the 20 years, and we're now into year 18, and we've already put 10 million on within our communities in the last half of 2019, and we're moving forward with all due haste to keep deploying resources into our communities. This slide actually goes through the timeline of the case. I'm not going to read that to you. You're welcome to read it yourself. It, along with the history that's located on our website, will help inform you as to how we came to be. I will tell you that that when the case was settled, there was a fast track fund that was created. So you'll hear me talk about fast track grantees during the course of this presentation, and just understand that as to that last 38 million, that was an immediate distribution that happened in late 2018. That cohort of grantees came about through a separate process before NAAF itself was actually launched. But we believe, and I think you probably do too, is all of the fast track fund grantees, who are all listed on our website, by the way, you can study them on the website, are all involved in this, but their fast track funds came in a different process. The funds were transferred to NAAF in December of 2018, and our first request for application launched last year, August. Again, we funded over 80 project applicants and over 100 discrete projects. We are very close to putting the entire list of the 80 that were funded in the 100 projects on our website, but we felt that it was really actually more important right now for us to launch this 2020 RFA, get it out there so you could be studying and determining what you were going to apply for. But shortly thereafter, you're going to be able to go to our website in the next couple of weeks and be able to see what we funded in late 2019. So just kind of remember to do that if you want to see who's doing what out there alongside you. So each year, the request for applications may have a different scope. You're going to see some kind of new things that we put into it this year, several of them in response to COVID-19 pandemic, but some you'll see that were retained from the previous year. But it could be that we differ from in scope from year to year. That is up to the trustees to determine that, but we welcome your ongoing input, because we have a survey that's been on our website from day one, and we continue to encourage folks to go in and let us know what you think we should be doing next. The trust mission is in section 7. So if you look at the trust agreement, it really very specifically drives us into what we think are sort of the mission areas of NAAF as an organization. And it's to make grants to eligible grant recipients, and described in another section of the trust agreement, to fund business assistance, agricultural education, technical support, and advocacy services to Native farmers and ranchers to support and promote their continued engagement in agriculture. That's a verbatim extracted from the trust agreement itself. This next slide in front of you is our current trustees, and they've been hard at it since July 2018, meeting very frequently to really fashion the strategic vision and the planning that goes behind all of the activities of NAAF as an organization. You can also at any time visit our website and take a look at our staff, as we've been pulling in staff, all of whom have some connection to agriculture and food. We've been we post their pictures and their resumes on our website. So feel free to reach out to any of them. They're all amazing folks and very engaged with all of our communities. Here is our RFA timeline for this year, this slide. And so if you just want to put those dates on your calendar, please do. We launched it April 1st. We actually have, according to Tony, we already have several folks who've begun their applications in the software system. So I encourage everybody who's on the phone today to follow that lead and get in there and go ahead and set up an account if you don't already have one. But go ahead and get in the system. You can, Tony will walk you through how to save things and kind of keep what you're doing inside the system until you're ready to submit. The closing date of the actual application period is this June 1, but I'm going to talk in a little bit about this flexibility period, which is a couple of weeks after that, and I'll go into that in a minute. We also have the webinars that Carly already talked about, so please put those on your calendar. That 5th one is going to be primarily any kind of technical issues in submitting, or maybe last minute questions about how you want to present your budget, etc. So just be sure and put them all on your calendar. Because of the unique circumstances we are all enduring right now in the COVID-19 situation, we've added a 2-week flexibility period so that you as an applicant can submit and be considered for funding, but it allows us to literally kind of work more closely with you in that 2-week period if you're having trouble with internet connections or any challenges in obtaining signatures or in getting a hold of documents or information that you might need, or that if you have a partner on your project, they might need. And so what we are asking you to do is to go ahead and get in the system and submit, but immediately drop us an email and let us know that you'd like to use that 2-week flex period because you got some issues that kind of fall into that technical category. So we'd like for you to, we do need you to go ahead and submit by June 1 so that we can know that you're in the system on time, but we will work with you in that 2-week period. But it is a solid 2-week period. We have to cut it off at June 15th because we got to be able to quickly get into the review phase so that we can present these projects to the Board of Trustees and they can make their decisions quickly. I think all of us are painfully aware that time is of the essence, and so we don't want to cause any unnecessary lag, but we do realize that there could be some of you who need that 2-week flexibility period. Again, do not hesitate to give us a call. If that's not clear to you, then just shoot us an email or give us a call and we will reach back out to you and walk you through how it's going to work. But we've tried to make it as straightforward and flexible as possible. As required by the trust agreement in section 8A, if you want to look it up, there are several types of eligible grant recipients. One is nonprofit organizations with IRS section 501c3 tax exempt status, But if you haven't received that yet and you're like a new nonprofit, maybe you filed but you don't have that tax exempt status determined by the IRS yet, then please consider applying through a fiscal sponsor that has achieved the 501c3 status. All of us are dealing with a lot of moving parts right now at the federal government level, and the Treasury Department has a lot on its hands. So I would not be surprised if there's some delay in determination of 501c3 tax status. So if you're in that place where you filed for it but you don't have it yet, then don't waste any time. Go ahead and search around and try to find a fiscal sponsor to work with you. If you got any questions about that, also give us a call or shoot us an email. Educational organizations, as described in that particular section 170 of the Internal Revenue Code, are eligible grant recipients, and then CDFIs, including certified native CDFIs and emerging native CDFIs. However, such CDFI also has to be a tax exempt organization in section 501c3 of the Internal Revenue Code. If you're a CDFI and you fall into that category, just give us a holler if you have any questions about that. The fourth kind of eligible recipients are tribal governments, state or federally recognized, or an instrumentality of a state or federally recognized tribe. We've gotten a lot of questions about what is an instrumentality, and really it's not for really us to say, because tribal governments, that can be a department of a tribal government, it could be another entity associated with a tribal government, but we really rely on the tribal governments to show us the documentation around how they basically created this instrumentality of theirs, either as a department or some other arm's length entity. So we need for you to, if you're a tribal government or a rep from a tribal government, please be prepared to work closely with us about gathering up those documents. And there are some requirements that sort of sit around tribal governments as well as other recipients. For tribal governments, the grant funds have to be used for charitable and educational purposes. So that's going to impact how you actually think about what you're trying to actually accomplish. We will be looking for audited financial statements. You'll see those kinds of questions in our actual application form online. But if you do not have them, then we'll, you just need to, if you don't have an audit, and we need to see financial statements, but tribal governments have audits. So, but as to other organizations, you may not be required to have an audit. Again, if you have kind of struggle with what you need to be providing us in this particular arena around audits or financial statements, please don't wait till the last minute. Just give us a holler and we will walk you through what our lawyers have interpreted as our required documents in this particular area. The other important thing to note, and Tony on our team really is our point person on working with tribal governments and securing these limited waivers of sovereign immunity. The language of the trust agreement, this is a requirement. It actually says that tribal governments shall agree in order to receive funds as an eligible grant recipient. We have samples of resolutions as well as language of limited waiver of sovereign immunity samples, and we're happy to share those with you. So if you are a tribal government or an instrumentality of a tribal government, please let us know so that we can get that to you right away and you can start looking at it. The bottom line here is that for us, because that is a requirement and not something that we don't have to necessarily do, we have to do it. And so we would love to make sure if your tribe is going to submit that we start talking to you early so that the securing of those waivers don't get in the way of us actually sending the funds to you if you're selected for funding this year. Grants to fiscal sponsors, I've touched on that a little bit already, but again, if you're like a startup 501c3 or even a community-based organization that is trying to decide whether you're going to be a 501c3, get a fiscal sponsor to work with you. But that fiscal sponsor has to have received their 501c3 determination. So those are the four major categories, that the only categories that we can fund in terms of eligible grant recipients. We got to have the verification of eligibility. If you applied last year, even if you weren't funded, Tony can walk you through that information should already be in our system, so you're not going to have to necessarily come up with it again. But we do need the documentation, and we're happy to answer any questions that you might have about whether any documentation is sufficient or not. The other thing I'll share with you is the applicants must serve Native farmers and ranchers and food people. And just know that the trustees and our staff are taking the broadest possible interpretation of farmer and rancher that we can. Obviously, it means, you know, folks who are farmers and ranchers, but we also have included fishers, as well as those who work in forest products, harvesters and gatherers, and those working in community agriculture, such as community gardens, food hubs, farmers markets, etc. So again, if you have any question about whether what you're doing as an organization is actually serving farmers and ranchers, just send us an email and pose it as a question. We're happy to work with you to answer it and kind of tease out what the answer is. We also need for you to, if you're going to receive the funds, that you provide services to Native farmers and ranchers, and to support their and promote their continued engagement in agriculture. That is central to the mission of NAAF itself. And again, these key areas or mission areas that we always look for in applications for funding is business assistance, agricultural education, technical support, and advocacy services. But that can be so many things. And there were so many amazing projects that came forward last year. We anticipate we're going to have just as many amazing ones this year. And there's a lot of things that you can do within those four areas. So just, you know, reach out if you have any questions. There's also some allowable uses of funds that we talk about in the RFA itself. One of those particularly is the trust agreement does not allow NAAF as NAAF, as the fund, to give grants to individuals or to give loans to individuals. We can only send the funds of NAAF out through those four types of organizations. But those folks can then turn around and actually do grants to individuals, or do grants to, or do loans to individuals. So just think about it in that way. You might have something in mind that you think would be great. We can't send money directly to an individual, but you can facilitate that through how you design and execute on your actual work. So same holds true for loans. Normally, what we saw last year was we started out this whole process with a 24-month duration project scope, but we saw most of the projects we saw were not 24 months. They were literally 12 or 18. So what we're asking you to do is to consider 12, 18, 24-month projects. We really would prefer not to fund beyond 24 months. Because we want to keep these resources moving throughout all of Indian country. But just there is no right or wrong answer. It really depends on what you're trying to do as to which length of time your project wants to function within. The funds can be used for project support, for capital expenditures, for loans, for grants, re-granting by you, or for scholarships. But if you are wanting to do something and are not sure exactly where it fits within that description, just drop us a note and we'll work with you to figure that out. Non-eligible entities or projects include those who don't provide business assistance, ag ed, technical support, or advocacy, work outside the U.S., projects that aren't agriculture related, use of funds that aren't specifically focused on charitable or educational purposes, projects that don't provide assistance to further the success of native farming and ranching and food production and food systems. So that kind of gives you a sense of what we are not truly interested in funding. The use of funds for litigation, we cannot do that under the trust agreement. We're strictly prohibited from funding any projects that are going to be used in litigation. And we also prohibited from direct lobbying or political activity as defined by the IRS. However, there's a lot of other forms of advocacy that we can fund. We just cannot fund the lobbying piece. Many of you who work in these spaces are very familiar with those prohibitions, but they're embedded in our trust agreement. The other thing is, particularly educational organizations, we find sometimes they have multi-purposes, and sometimes those purposes don't have anything to do with working with native farmers and ranchers. So if you are an educational institution, either native controlled or non-native controlled, you need to be driving into the space of working directly with native farmers and ranchers. The entities, the organizations that have received fast track funding in the past, and there were 34 of those, they're listed on our website. They're eligible for additional funding from NAAF, but for new projects or continuations of the work that they started in their fast track funding. The same holds true for 2019 project recipients. We're not going to say because you received funds in 2019, you're not eligible to participate here. That is not that's not the position we're taking, but we really want you to focus on new projects or continuations of previously funded work that has finished or is nearing finishing by the time the funds that we're doing in 2020 move forward. Again, if you're a community-based organization, you're a non-501c3, a grassroots group, you've got to have the 501c3 status in order for us to move towards funding you. But that's why I really encourage you, if you fall into the category of an organization that's community-based, you really don't want to do 501c3, then please find a partner. And so long as your partner can be your fiscal sponsor or just a cooperator with you on the project, but they take the lead because they're an eligible entity, please don't consider that you're out of the running, because you're not. We just have to, you have to figure out and get creative a little bit and work with us to make sure it meets our requirements. But we're fine to fund you. You just have to do it through an organization that has one of those 4 status types. If you got any questions about that, please don't hesitate to let us know. For some reason. Okay. And also, because the Keep-Siegel litigation really was very focused on access to credit and discrimination in access to credit, we really will always, I can't see a time when we're not going to be asking for everyone to consider what kinds of issues that you could incorporate into your project that are at the core of access to credit concerns. And for CDFIs, that's easy because they are all about the business of providing capital and credit to folks who are trying to do all sorts of things, including agriculture. For some of the others of you, you may kind of struggle with how to actually talk about this, but we encourage you to reach out if you've got questions about it. But we really want to see projects that have some component that speaks to these issues that were central to the Keep-Siegel case, because we've got to keep pushing as all of us together on these issues of access to credit so that we can improve that over time and make sure that folks who are in food and in agriculture have capital needs that can actually be met. And so we want to see that in your projects. You're okay to combine focus areas. We're fine with that. We saw a lot of projects last year that had components literally of all 4 of those mission areas that were embedded in the projects. You're going to see again this year that we're still interested in seeing what's out there for value-added agriculture. We take a very broad definition of what that means, and if you've got any questions, we'll be happy to discuss those with you. But it can be all types of processes by which value is added to raw agricultural products or raw hunted or gathered products. And a lot of folks think about value-added agriculture as really only relevant in a commercial agriculture space, but that's not really true. We add value by just slightly processing things and getting them back out to our community all the time. So just let us know again if you have any questions about what value-added agriculture means, but you will see it in the RFA itself. On the advocacy front, we're very interested in making sure that we have solid educational and technical information that sits under policies that affect us. And so you're going to see us talking about that in the advocacy piece that we have put into the RFA itself. And in terms of this last point on this particular slide, we really have got to be in a place where as we go down this road together, we have as many of folks within our communities who are interested in food or interested in agriculture pursue degree programs in those spaces, because we need them we need them. We need activities across every bit of our food systems, and this is one of them. It's very important that we keep kind of putting our shoulder against this issue of making sure that we support Native students who really want to see this as their career. And so we are interested in that in the broadest context possible. The funding areas, again, if you were with us last year, you heard us talk about 4 primary target areas. And then you also heard us talk about special emphasis areas. So we're doing the same thing again this cycle. The targeted are again targeted towards projects that we can fund that kind of flow through those eligible types of organizations. And then on the special emphasis side, we've changed it up just a little. If your project is all about youth programming, then we are actually setting up a whole separate application process just for the youth programming. We're going to leave the application period open for 6 months, and we're going to be taking, as project applications come in, we're going to look at them as on a rolling basis. And the trustees will have projects brought forward to them to fund on a rolling basis. But we're going to leave that application period open for a good solid 6 months. It's not going to, I think, expire until sometime in September. And so just if you're all about youth and youth programming, just know that it's going to look and feel like the portal for the general application, but it is very specific to youth. So holler if you got any questions about that. The other special emphasis areas is traditional foods, food sovereignty, agricultural extension, and I'll explain that one in a bit, and then advocacy. Funding applications around CDFIs. So from here for a little bit, I'm going to be talking about these kind of 4 targeted areas. The first one is CDFIs, and community development financial institutions are really important to move capital into our communities. We're seeking funding applications from CDFIs. And what we have come to know even more profoundly than we did prior to actually NAAF starting is that the number of folks interested in seeking capital for agriculture and food related enterprises is actually on the rise. And the number of CDFIs, native CDFIs who work in the space of ag lending is also on the rise. So we're not looking for a particular percentage of your available pool of lending for native farmers and ranchers. We just need for you to share with us in your application what you've been doing already in this space of funding farming and ranching and food, or what you see as the need. And I think my guess is that over time, many Native CDFIs are going to see a growth in interest in actually capital and loan products and technical assistance in this space around food and agriculture. So we're very interested in working with the CDFIs who serve our communities to make sure that some of these resources move into that direction. I think I went too far. We've set aside a pool of $4 million to be made available to fund CDFI related projects. There's no set limit on the amount of total available funding for any one project, but if you're a CDFI, we really ask that you not do an application that exceeds the total amount of the pool of $4 million. But somewhere in your application, if you know you could utilize 10 million, just tell us what you think the need is that exceeds the pool that we've set aside. But we just really are going to try to make sure that CDFIs who come in, none of their applications actually exceed the pool as one particular application. But just give us a signal as what you think the need is there for sure. Priority funding for educational organizations. Man, those can take a lot of different avenues: food and ag related classroom training, classroom education programs, ag programs, professional degree programs, prerequisites for professional degrees, scholarships, curriculum development, applied research, career technical training. There's so many ways to go in agricultural education. You can provide community technical assistance or other activities related to building success for Native farmers and ranchers, improving access to food, or focusing on food sovereignty or traditional foods. The training, educational activities, or technical support should be made available to Native students of the educational organization and can be part of a certificate program or a degree-seeking program. There's so many ways to come at this, but funding can also be sought to support activities that improve food sovereignty, food access, subsistence activities, as well as agricultural sciences related to food and ag. A lot of breadth that you can move around in as an educational organization. We really encourage the tribal colleges to seriously consider applying this year, but other educational organizations are also eligible to apply. So just take a look. If you're not sure whether your educational organization can apply, take a look at the actual language of the trust agreement and what the IRS determines is eligible, because that's written in to the trust agreement. We've set aside a total of $2 million of funding in this particular area. Again, there's no upper or lower limit on the amount of funds requested. We just ask that you not exceed the total pool. And when I say overhead limitations, I'll get to that in a minute. The priority funding areas for 501c3s, funding applications here are sought from nonprofits meeting the definition of eligible entities. Again, I've gone over, if you're not quite there yet, how the fiscal sponsor should be. You really need to be showing us that you're already engaged with Native food people, Native farmers and ranchers, or other folks in your community who are in the space of food. That doesn't have to be all you do. Your organization might have many other things that they do, but we really are interested in making sure that the funds NAAF has are used to support the agriculture and food piece of what the overall organization does. 501c3s can put forward an application that talks really about any of the 4 mission areas that are allowable under the framework of the trust agreement. And if it's a startup nonprofit, we really, take a look at that fiscal sponsor requirement as well. I will tell you, I only put it here, but if you actually read the 501c3, this language that you're seeing right here on this slide, which I believe is on page 13 of the actual request for application document, that language is sprinkled throughout the whole of this RFA. So don't think that it only applies to 501c3s. We are actively looking for things that are happening that we can support that involve planning activities to regionalize or localize food systems supporting our communities, economic analysis to determine the total impacts in the food system solution as a result of this COVID-19 situation that we're in and the impacts that are happening. Pandemic disaster for food access response and contingency planning for native food systems, resiliency planning for native food systems, intertribal cooperative efforts within regions to bolster native food systems, response plans for coordinated food production, planning for cooperative or coordinated food purchases within regions, and similar projects. We inserted this literally right before we went to press. We just felt that it was so important that we actually throw some ideas out your way as you are thinking about what to apply for. You're probably already thinking about these things, but we wanted to make sure that we put them in writing inside the RFA so that we could stimulate as much discussion and planning and resiliency planning and cooperative efforts across all of our communities to really drive into the food system issues and impacts that we're seeing in real time around COVID-19. We knew these issues existed for us before, but they're in high resolution right now. And so just know that this language on this particular slide, feel free to incorporate in your planning around your projects any of these ideas, and that's not an exhaustive list of really COVID-19 impacts. And so please be creative in that area. We would welcome seeing those. We've set aside a pool of $3 million for projects in this particular category. With regard to tribal governments, we kept some of the same things in that we had last year around value added, because we still get a lot of calls, even in the face of COVID-19, of tribal governments interested in really pursuing value added activities. Those might be on hold for a little while. We're not sure, for just after we stabilize a bit and hopefully get into place as soon as possible that we can all open back up. But just, we didn't want to extract that as an option for funding for this go around. Again, so this language that you see on this particular slide is very similar. It may be just exactly the same that we had in the request for applications for 2019. Although we did insert this resiliency planning here as well. I just mistakenly failed to include it in every single one of our slides here. So just be sure and remember that that language is the same as you saw in 501c3, but you should use it also to inform your projects in the educational and even your technical assistance piece around CDFIs if it fits. And this is additional ideas that fall into this whole area of response around our food systems and strengthening them as we move forward. We also will, and we kept it in, we also will consider the whole hemp issue. It's still a top of mind thing for many tribes, and tribal governments continue to have their tribal plans be approved by USDA at a more rapid rate than state governments do. So we don't know where you sit with regard to that right now. We believe probably the immediacy of response to COVID-19 is likely overtaking many of us, but we did want to leave it in case this was something that was still of importance to you and your communities. We set aside a pool of $2 million, but for those kinds of, particularly around planning issues, we'd like to see a cap of 150,000, but just understand we're open to whatever you might put in your application. We just, the pool is $2 million this time. So I'm going to move to special emphasis funding right quick. Again, I've already told you what we were doing with regard to these 4 areas: advocacy, ag extension, youth programming, traditional foods, and food sovereignty. If you remember last year, we actually had 500,000 set up for each one of our special emphasis areas last year. And what we've done this year, we're going to provide a total of 1 million in the pool for each one of the 4 special emphasis areas. So that will be 1 million in advocacy, 1 in agricultural extension, 1 in youth programming, and 1 million in traditional foods and food sovereignty programs. The funds can be used to support a wide range of projects. The topics can include some of the things that we have listed here: establishing a new focus area for existing food sovereignty programs, scaling up, secondary or follow-up activities to implement an existing food sovereignty assessment process, doing a food sovereignty assessment, activities in response to the evolving COVID-19 situation. We'd like to fund as many as we could in this category. So just don't be afraid of the limitations here. Just make sure that you apply within this category if you feel that it suits you. And we will definitely look at everything. We review every application that comes in, no matter what. We don't on the issue of advocacy. It's being brought home to us very clearly right now that advocacy is and always has been listed in the trust agreement as one of the 4 major mission areas of NAAF. We really did not put any focused funding in that for last year, but we are this year because we believe that it is critical. The Farm Bill and what's happening to implement the Farm Bill that came out in 2018 and was just kind of getting its feet under it in terms of implementation in 2019 is going to keep going forward. But there's also a lot of things happening at the congressional level right now that is pushing funds towards many, many agricultural related areas. And there's several folks that we can refer you to who monitor this space quite well. But we believe that the Native Farm Bill Coalition's work, which now encompasses approaching 180 tribes and multiple intertribal organizations as allies in that whole policy arena, is actually probably more important now than it even was during the Farm Bill. So we are actively seeking applications that would would support the Native Farm Bill Coalition and related efforts to support the continued work of the coalition around food systems development and native agriculture policy needs. So it can incorporate other issues, but that has to be central to the application itself. It can also include work that could be done to analyze the development and policies around COVID-19 impacts. Let us know if you got any questions about what we're actually searching for there, but we have dedicated a pool of up to 1 million in that particular area, and we're looking to fund at least 1 project in this area. Youth programming, as I said, that's going to be in a separate portal, and we tried to keep youth programming as broad as possible because, you know, giving our youth as many opportunities to understand and help and be involved in our food systems and agriculture itself is really critical to our future. So just be creative. Classroom activities whenever we can go back to class, youth gardens, ag policy councils, all sorts of summits, mobilizing Native youth to take on more leadership roles, just so many ways that youth can be involved in agriculture, can be included in hands-on food production, all sorts of support for community and school activities, online activities. There's a lot of amazing work already happening with Native youth all over the place. So just we encourage you to take these ideas and run with it, or just come up with your own that really support youth in your communities or in your region around their future in our food systems. So we've set aside a pool of 1 million. We'd like to fund a whole lot of smaller projects, kind of capped out at 50,000. But again, just understand that that's a separate portal, a separate kind of avenue on the software that we use. And again, we're going to keep that whole, the youth piece does not have a June 30 deadline. If you come in the youth programming door, that application is going to be kept open until September 30. And then we'll roll and review and make determinations on funding throughout that period, and probably right after that period closes. If you got any questions about that, please let us know. And then the last category for special emphasis is agricultural extension. Farmers and ranchers and food folks and food champions need assistance all over the place in terms of education, research, extension of knowledge, community supported activities. And I will tell you that that we have never had enough funding through the tribal colleges. We've never had enough funding through, and by that I mean federal funding, through the federally recognized tribal extension program. We've never received the level of attention that we've needed around these extension of knowledge and just technical underpinnings and support. And so what we have decided is that we're going to spur this on. And what we are wanting to do is to start funding a whole body of work around creating a 21st century native agricultural extension system. We are looking for ideas, and we believe that these things are so important. We know that our tribal colleges have never received the amount of funding that they need to actually build out these and keep them going. Same holds true for the FERCHAP program. So we just need that sort of service to sit up under our food champions and our farmers and ranchers. And so NAAF is coming forward, and we're going to set aside a pool of $1 million to start working in this particular priority area. And we encourage you all to get creative about what this looks like, and give us your ideas of projects that we could fund that would literally push us all forward into a system that meets all of our needs and serves us in a much better way, and provides resources to those critical players like the tribal colleges and the FERCHAP folks in this space, because we need them with us, particularly now. Anyway, so that's what we're doing in that particular area. And so that's the last of the 4 special emphasis areas. Think about, when you're doing your application, just the scope and nature of the services you're wanting, how your requested award fits into your overall budget for your organization. How you integrate community accountability and Native leadership into your project. If you're not a Native-led or owned or operated organization, we need to hear exactly why you're in this space, what you've done so far, and how you incorporate Native voices and Native engagement at every step of the way. There are some very specific discussions of the evaluation criteria. They are listed here on this slide. Proposed results, farmer and rancher demand, which could be also food champions and fisher demand, your organizational team and who your collaborators are. We want you to think about how what you're doing impacts access to credit. We have given you some ideas when we actually talk about this evaluation criteria. We've given you some ideas I think it's on page 22, I believe, in the request for application, about how to actually think about that particular issue. There's an evaluation component, an innovation component, and then a replicability and application component. All of them are pretty self-explanatory, but if you have any questions, let us know. That language, the evaluation criteria, actually starts on page 21 of the request for applications. And I really encourage you to read through the full request a couple of times and really think about what it is you want to do and how it can really kind of speak to all these evaluation criteria. If you actually are in the online system, we've tried to make it as checklist as possible so that you will know when you're in the system what's a mandatory document and what isn't. And so if you have any questions while you're inside the software, just let us know. A couple of folks last year submitted an application, but they only gave us their employer identification number documentation. That is really not enough to actually show that you are the eligible entity type. That's just, you know, an employer ID number. So if you are looking at your documents and you're not sure which ones really can show us eligibility, because it is a requirement, we can't really look the other way on eligible entity. It's very clear in the trust agreement. Just holler at us ahead of time. You can take a picture of them on your phone and we can tell you whether that's a sufficient document or not. The use of the funds. If you're awarded of a project for 2020, just be sure that your budgets are clear and you've identified in your budget narrative how you intend to use the funds. We have some very, again, specific requirements that are in the trust agreement about how funds that we provide to you are to be used. So this slide shares with you the trust agreement requirements in that space. In your budget, we only need to know the funding that you're requesting from us. You don't have to give us your entire organizational funding. We need just literally what you are asking for from us. We will ask you what your overall organizational budget is, but we don't have to have a level of detail on that. We've included some budget guidelines, a budget template, a sample budget, and a sample budget narrative. You're going to be able to link to those from our website so that you can actually see some samples of how these things could be easily put together. Again, if you've got questions, please let us know. Please, at the top of your budget form, please include your organization name and the project name and the requested grant period. If you have trouble doing that technologically, then again, let us know and we'll try to walk you through it. But we really need for that to come in with it at the top. If you're projecting a 2-year budget, for instance, we do need for you to expand the columns and actually show us what you intend to do in year 1 versus year 2. And then in the project budget narrative, just explain to us how you're going to use the various components of the budget that you request. This slide really talks about budget categories, personnel, direct costs, meetings and travel. Again, we're as hesitant to you as you are perhaps on forecasting what meetings and travel might look like. I don't think anyone on this phone call can honestly say they know when we're all going to be released to move around and actually convene in any sort of group. So as you're putting these together, just keep that in mind. You might try to have backup delivery mechanisms online or by telephone or by Skype or by Zoom or any number of ways. You may not be able to do it that way. You might want to go ahead and include meetings and travel in your budget, knowing that if this COVID situation extends on and on, we will gladly work with you to move those travel dollars to another category. We're already doing that with our 2019 grantees who are reaching out to us to see if they can move travel funds into another category. So I'm just kind of telling you up front, if I were you and I was actually putting together a budget for a proposed project right now, I would go ahead and include some meetings and travel in there, but I would put an asterisk or something beside it, and then just, in a footnote or something, just reflect in your narrative. You could just let us know that you would want to be able to repurpose those funds to another category if we're still under travel restrictions. Supplies, consultants, printing, publications. I mean, those kinds are just kind of standard project categories. If we've not covered one, then just reach out to us and we'll work with you to figure out exactly where you should put it on the sample budget form. Intermediary funds are asked for in the project, and those are just really lump sum in terms of how much you think you're going to do for re-granting or loans or scholarships. Indirect costs, all applicants for NAAF are still going to be limited to no more than 15% allowed indirect costs. We did that last year. We didn't really receive any complaints about it, so we are going to maintain that level. We could lower it or we could increase it later, but we felt it was, at least for now, kind of appropriate. If you run into trouble in that regard, just let us know, but that's a strict cap of no more than 15%. We are interested to make sure that we stay calibrated in a way that makes sense to people. So just please give us your opinions about it. But for this particular year, again, we're looking at no more than 15% allowed indirect. So I think I'm going to turn it over to Tony now, and Tony's going to walk us through a next set of slides and take us to the end, and then we'll open up for questions. Tony?
Hello, everyone. Again, thank you for joining us. For some of you who already applied for either the fast track funding or our new funding, this will be somewhat repetitive. We have streamlined a lot of this new application to make it easier for everyone. But for those of you that are new and those of you that are calling, I'm gonna go through each slide. And if you want the visuals, you can come to our website where we will host or have a link to all these different documents. So this first slide is how to apply online. You will go to our website. You'll see 2020 requests for applications, and there's multiple areas on our website where you will find a button to move to either the application or to view the application in a Word document. The first step is going to www.nativeamericanagriculturefund.org/grants. You will need to create an account, and the username for your account will be your email. So make sure that whoever is logging on to eventually be the person that needs to that logs on and creates a username, be the person that will continually get into this system and update it, because we will send notices and you will upload documents even after award notification. So make sure that whoever does this is someone that's going to be there for a while, or somebody that you can pass this work on, just because we had a lot of issues where somebody created an account and just to get the application up, but they're maybe not the grant manager. And then we were sending that person emails that weren't getting forwarded to the person who's actually doing the projects. So keep that in mind when you're creating your username, your email. You create your own password. Next slide. You can not create multiple accounts. If you created an account in the last cycle, and then you will just log back into your dashboard and you will see our new process. In the Foundant software system that we use, they call each grant a process, and we currently have 3 processes. We have the 2019 application that went out, and those have all closed and been awarded, but we still use that platform to communicate with all of our successful grantees. We have our new 2020 RFA, and we have our youth RFA. So for this first section, you'll enter your organization's information, and then you will move on through. It will not allow you to move on to the next section unless you have included all of the information that has an asterisk, a little star next to it. That is required. So all required asterisk areas need to be filled out before you can move to the next section. So once you've created your email and username, that will be how you log on for the entirety of your application and post-application award. The organizational information is separate from your individual applicant username information. We also have in there, so the person who's filling it out can enter that information about the organization. And there's also an area where you can have two people in the system. And so we have our main contact person, we want to be the username email that creates the account. But you can also have another contact person or a signatory person, maybe somebody of authority who will eventually sign off on the application can have access to it. But you'll see us call the person that we want to have more day-to-day update information, the contact person. The next slide you will see is your organization, where you don't have to have your EIN number at this time, your tax ID number. We would prefer it, but you can skip that question and answer it later on. We have it both in here in your organizational information, and we also ask a similar question in the application itself. Your organization's information, then the project contact, your signing authority question is what I was talking about earlier. You don't have to have the signing authority person in here when you're filling it out, but eventually we've found that most applicants have been done very well by having two people that have access to the system. Once you have filled out all that information, you'll see a blue submit button, and you will have an email that will go to your email account just to confirm that it was set up correctly, and the email is linked from Foundant to your personal email. If you have any questions on setting up your account, you can contact us, and we have our contact information at the end of this slide. You can go to our website. You don't have to have the email link immediately if you're running through this and you don't want to stop and go back to your email. You can just push continue without checking. But please make sure that you do go back and check your email, because again, this is going to be our main form of contact with you during your application and your award. If you are awarded, we will send emails through this system. So make sure that your email is set up correctly. Once you have moved to that next slide to apply, you will see some instructions on that first page. You will have an option for which application you want to apply for. Right now, the screen shows the top of this page, which is the 2020 RFA General. And then if you are applying for youth, you would scroll down and you would check the youth. You can't apply for them at the same time. You have to apply for them separately, but they're both, the option to apply is on this first page that you will see. Once you push apply, it gives you a box to check for which the 2020 youth or 2020 general, and then you check whatever one you want to apply for. Okay, so during the application, let me go back. For those of you who have already applied, you will go to what we call our dashboard. And in the dashboard, that's the home page that you see when you have filled out all of your information. It takes you to this dashboard that whenever you log on, and that's where you're going to go. You'll get updated information there. If we send you a notice, if we have a document that we need you to either submit or follow up, then you'll see that on your dashboard. If you are a returning applicant who applied in the 2019 RFA application, when you go to your dashboard, you will see on the upper right-hand side a link to apply for this new process. And you will also eventually see a link that says copy process. So any of the questions that were answered in the 2019 application, you will be able to copy and they will automatically generate into your 2020 application. That will make it easier for you. You can also, some of our questions have changed. For instance, instead of having an open area where you will explain something, we've asked it in either a yes, no, or a toggle down option, just so that it will improve. A lot of our questions last year we felt like might have been a little repetitive, so this time we're asking more specific questions to make it easier for you to flow through the application. We've also increased the amount of character limits and size limits for all of our uploads. When you are applying and you're in the application, you'll have a series of questions related to your organization again, and what type of funding you're applying for. And once you have done all those, you will also see the area where you will upload. Throughout the application, there are a handful of areas where you'll upload. We have all of these documents linked. The blue documents, if you click that, it will automatically download to your computer, or it will provide you, it will open up a link to where that document exists, depending on what document it is. So you will click the upload button once you have filled out, for instance, our budget template, and upload it. We also have a final section where you will update all information. So, and we have a checklist at the bottom to make sure you've included all your required uploads. Once you complete your application, again, this is what your dashboard looks like. You will see either pending application, the draft application, and then you will revisit it once we close, and you'll have award information that will eventually show up. We are going to make sure that, again, you have access to your application in the system. We didn't have that at the beginning of last year. We've now added that, so individuals that are applying can have, right now, that have applied last year, have access to their full application, but this year we'll do the same thing. So again, former applicants, this is what your page will look like, and that's the copy process button. You can do the same thing for the youth RFA, and it will ask you where you want to copy from. Because we've only had one prior cycle of funding, it only gives you one option. But as we continue, just make sure that you're continually copying the most recent process. These are our critical dates. April 1st of 2020 is when this opened. It will close on June 1st. Again, we do have some flexibility periods as it relates to COVID-19. Please get your applications in as soon as possible for us to help you in any way. Last year when we had applications out, 98% of the applications came in on our closing date. So if people experienced, we didn't have many, but a handful of people that did experience issues on that last day, we didn't have time to fix it. And for last year, we've eliminated the majority of the issues that we had were related to character limit. People were creating documents, Word documents, and then when it was time to upload them or to migrate the Word document they created and paste it into the application, they had too many characters or the size limits wouldn't allow them to upload. And it was just too late for them to fix it because it wasn't the last day. But now we've upped those size limits, so we shouldn't have that issue. But just in case, get in the system early, test your uploads, make sure that they work and that you're staying within our character limits. Again, all of this information and information related to it from last year is within our Q&A. You go to our main website, nativeamericanagriculturefund.org/grants. And if you need any technical assistance, you can email grants@nativeamericanagriculturefund.org. Although we prefer online applications, we will accept paper applications. We have a copy of the paper application on our website, but you can also contact us and we will send you a paper application packet. You must adhere to all of the character limits and size limits associated with the online application in your paper application. And they must be submitted by June 1st or June 15th with the flexibility date. And our address, you will write to Attention Grants Team at 534 West Research Center Boulevard, Suite 200 or 220, P.O. Box 1427, Fayetteville, Fayetteville, Arkansas 72701. Again, as Carly mentioned, we have a series of webinars. The last one being more of a Q&A to get you through that final application, questions that you might have. The next one is April 23rd, followed by May 7th, May 21st, and May 28th. All of those links are on our website, and you also have access to former webinars. This one is being recorded and it will also be housed in a location where you can review it. Our phone number is 479-445-6226. Again, 479-445-6226. And the phone line is open Monday to Friday, 8 to 4. You can leave a message. And
Thank you, Tony. So at this time, we're going to move into a question and answer period. Janie or Tony, whoever it applies, will let us know what the answer is. Janie, are you ready?
Yes, are you ready?
I am. So everybody, if you haven't sent your question yet, please do so. Thank you to all the questions we have.
So before you get started, Carly, I want to remind everybody, we already have some kind of standard question and answer FAQs, frequently asked questions, that should be on our website, but we will be updating those after every webinar and adding things that maybe just came up for the first time. So keep looking back.
Okay, so we'll get started. First question, Janie, are sample budgets available for review online?
Yes, one of the documents that if you go back to those pages that are in this webinar, there should be sample budget and sample budget narrative documents that are there for you to take a look at.
Okay. Next question. If the requirements to shelter in place and refrain from public gatherings continue during the new grant period, how would you suggest grantees approach communication and contact with targeted participants?
You know, all I can tell you is, well, first of all, everybody hopes that we come out soon. All I can tell you right now is that we would never encourage you to violate an order of your tribal government or other public health authority to gather up. But we can tell you right now, some of our 2019 grantees are already kind of shifting, and they're doing YouTube videos to reach their target audience. They are doing, series of webinars like this and connecting people that way. Some of them are just getting their target audiences on the phone. That, on the phone implies that you actually know who your food people are. And so in some projects you may not know. But I just think you've got to just kind of think outside the box and figure out exactly what the best methods that would be. In terms of actually writing your application, I think everyone on this phone call and everyone who submits should really kind of think about their narratives of what their project is all about, and just build in that caveat. Build in, if all things are lifted, we intend to do this. However, if it's not, then we've thought about it and we think this might be the best way to approach. What I will tell you is that we are already being extremely flexible with our 2019 grantees and working with them to shift from in-person meetings to webinars and YouTubes and other means of delivery. And we will do the same moving forward in 2020.
Thank you. Next question. If we are able to hold meetings with the public, such as chapter house members and public schools, what may be appropriate strategies if a second COVID-19 outbreak occurs and additional limits are imposed on gatherings?
I think it's kind of the same question, same answer that I gave previously. If it were me and I was writing an application, I would really have a plan A, plan B, kind of embedded in your narrative. The best things that I think we can do is we're all in this journey together. We really are learning as we all go how stringent these shelter in place orders are going to be, and when we actually are able to move around more, what those requirements are going to be. We're all on this journey to try to figure that out together. In terms of just writing an application for this RFA, I would just suggest to all of you on the line to be as fluid as you think you need to be. Approach it as a plan A or plan B, and realize that there isn't a wrong answer to this right now. There's only options, and we're not going to be so stringent on you if you're an awardee for next year that we're going to be flexible with you all, just like we are with the 2019 folks.
Next question. Are tribal government proposals limited to charitable and educational purposes only?
Yes, that is in the trust agreement. So even if you have one project activity that really isn't in the charitable educational piece, you've got to have other project activities that are. You've got to kind of walk into that space of reaching out to all of your native farmers and ranchers and pulling them in either as a support system, business assistance, technical support, educational, charitable activities that you do through your tribal government. And there's so many ways to do that, but it is written actually in the trust agreement.
Do we need to verify eligibility by a certain date prior to submission?
Our advice to you is the same, and Tony, jump in here. We really encourage you to verify, and if you haven't received your, like for instance, your 501c3 status yet, I really wouldn't wait till the last minute and submit as a non-eligible entity. I wouldn't do that. I would go ahead and try to find a fiscal sponsor now. The documentation that supports what kind of organization you are, if you don't have it in hand, you've got to get it in hand and get it in the door, or we cannot fund you. We can't send any resources out without it being in our files. It's literally a requirement of the trust agreement. But the verification, I would just suggest that you get on it as quickly as possible so that that doesn't hold you up. If there are, like for instance, on the COVID-19 flexibility, we anticipated for you that there might be some issues kind of gathering that stuff up, that documentation up right now, you know, in the middle of all this. But we've got to have a stopping point at some point. I do know that we can't send the funds out until everything is tied up with a bow and all the documentation is in place. But if you submit your application with no documentation that you're eligible, then we will have a very difficult time reviewing it because we cannot fund anything that's not from an eligible organization. So if you got questions,
you actually won't even be able to submit your application if you haven't uploaded a document. If it's a blank document, we'll have to revisit it, and you likely won't be able to make it onto the next portion of our application review. We require this documentation. It doesn't have to be that extensive. What we saw a lot of last year was for tribal governments. It was a resolution supporting the application. We saw a lot of the documents from Treasury, We have noted in this year's application that application for an EIN number, a tax number, is not sufficient. You have to have other supporting documents that beyond that you've applied for an EIN, that you are a nonprofit. We also had letters from organizations from their chairpersons of their boards, but and letters from educational institutions, either from a dean or from their financial office or the office of the president of the university. If you are a nonprofit, then we are going to check your numbers, and we're going to check those numbers with the IRS to make sure that you are in good standing. If you are a tribal government right now, I know my tribe and many other tribes are shut down on stay-at-home orders. So if you applied last year, you can hold those places, use those documents from last year's application with some type of notification, even in the form of an email, that when your council reconvenes or your office is open, you can get an updated version of that document. Eventually, we will need waivers of sovereign immunity, and we encourage you to pursue those early. It will only be in the amount of your funding. It's a limited waiver, but that has been an issue in this 2019 year's funding cycle. Many tribes don't meet on regular basis, and so maybe quarterly you need that immunity waiver prior to us releasing funds. But any of your current documents that you have are documents that you've supplied for in the past, let us know and we'll work with you.
Yeah, and I'm going to reiterate what Tony said, but add to this. This is really not an area that we have any flexibility. The trust agreement, if you read it, is very clear that we are only able to fund 4 different types, and they have to prove that they are those types. And that trust agreement was negotiated by the Department of Justice. It was not something that we came up with on our own. It literally has to guide everything that we do. So we just don't have any flexibility, and the trust agreement's really clear. So that's why that's why we're alerting you early and you know, straight up front in the request for application process that that these things are necessary because the trust agreement requires it.
And one thing you can do to make this easier, again, we're going to be around for a while. This is a 20-year drawdown trust. If you plan on applying every year, you can create a form document especially if you're a tribal government, a form resolution, and you just have sections to change the date and the amount of funding or the point of contact person within the grant. And then again, with the sovereign immunity waiver, create a document that your in-house counsel or law firm looks over that's been approved. So then next funding cycle, it will make it easier.
Thank you. So we're going to move on to the next question. And the person asks, we are curious if you would consider programs for agriculture teachers and those preparing to become agriculture teachers as a fundable idea. Of course, a primary target would be Native American teachers and teachers who work with significant numbers of Native American students.
We would love it. We actually need more Native agricultural teachers. We know we do. So yes, but I will tell you, just to fund general programs that educate teachers that aren't Native or that don't work in Native communities, no. But to do an you know, agricultural education teachers who are Native or who work solely in Native communities, absolutely.
Can funds be used for salaries to support the project work?
Oh yes, it's in our budget narrative and in our sample budgets. So yes, absolutely. Some of these questions are easy.
How does that limit the value added track in the current RFA? I think this question was specific to a point in time, but if you could just speak about value added track in the current RFA.
You know, value added activities really don't have to be just coming through tribal governments. Sometimes nonprofits do value-added activities. So don't read that as only important in the context of any one of the particular categories. We just talk about it a lot there because it seems to be an area that a lot of tribal governments are interested in. But value-added activities can take on any number of shapes and forms. Mainly when you're talking about value-added, you're talking about actually taking, harvested products or gathered products or agriculture things that you farm or livestock that you raise and turning it into something else. Sometimes you can add value just by packaging it to sell. Sometimes you can add value by taking strawberries and making strawberry jam. So there's so many layers of actually doing something additional to the raw plant or the raw product. I hope that makes sense. I'm not sure how it actually answers the early part of that question. You might want to
Go to the next question, and if people have clarifying issues, just give us another question.
Okay.
Could the tribe's Section 17 corporation apply for a business grant and the tribal government apply for a youth and education grant?
Yes, so long as both are eligible entities, that's fine. Yes, and in fact, there's no prohibition on someone applying for a youth programming grant and then turning around and also applying as an eligible entity for another area. So long as you're eligible for each application you put in, that is really important.
Yes, and I just want to repeat that for folks. So there are 8 separate areas, and you can apply for as many as you are eligible.
Right.
Next question, with respect to regranting, would small grants to Native American entities such as 501c3 organizations or other 501c3s that are non-Native but exclusively serve Native populations be allowed?
Yes.
Okay. Can funding be used to fund for an FTE for 24 months with the tribe either picking up the position, perhaps partial with another grant or not?
Yes. Oh, the other thing I forgot to mention, and all of us forgot to mention it, NAAF funds are not federal funds. When the settlement of the Keats Eagle case happened way back in 2010, 2011, the funds that made up the settlement actually left federal government control at that time. So they are not considered federal funds. So they can be used as a match for other federal monies that you might want to go after. So keep that in mind. We got that question kind of mid-year last year, but it really is an important thing to remember is that the funds for NAAF can be used as federal match. But there's no problem. There's no problem with us picking up part of somebody's salary and the tribal government or some other organization picking up the other part.
Our next question asks about, we are a 501c5. Would we be eligible?
Only 501c3s are actually listed in the trust agreement. So you'd have to come in through a fiscal sponsor that was a 501c3 or some other type of eligible entity.
Are we eligible to apply for youth programming and another special emphasis project?
Yes. So long as you're eligible.
Can a proposal include funding for ag land acquisition?
That's a trickier one. There's nothing that would necessarily prohibit us from doing that, but if it's not going to actually be taken over for food production by Native farmers and ranchers, if it's just going to be bought and held and not used for food, then that could be a problem. It all depends on how you explain how those resources would be used and used immediately.
Is there a definition you use for value-added ag? I think we covered that earlier.
Yeah, and honestly, I think Carly and Tony, let's go back in, and when we do an update on the FAQs, we'll give some more examples of value added. So look at the FAQs, give us a week or so.
I'll also, to let you guys know, you can use our funds as in-kind funding to leverage for other federal grants, or for federal grants you might want to apply. Our funding, like Janie said, is private.
Thank you. Next question. In the traditional food category, can we apply for less than 50,000?
Oh, sure. Absolutely.
Can a tribe put in more than one application?
For the same thing, no. For different work, there would be nothing to prevent that.
We had a similar question earlier about a Section 17 and a tribe applying. Those are two separate organizations. Well, one is a separate organization from the tribe itself. And so in that instance, yes, but if it's just a tribe and different departments, we prefer one application.
Right. It just depends on what you're trying to do and which part of you is trying to do it. There's probably a better way to say that, Tony, but.
Yeah.
Next question. How do you define youth?
Boy, that's a good one. I mean, some people define youth K through 12. Some people go all the way up to 30. We need to know how you define youth. I'm 65. I don't think I qualify as being youth. So I think there is a reasonableness to how you define it. Most of the folks that work in these various spaces define youth kind of simultaneously to young or beginning. And so it kind of fudges up past K through 12 and into college aged and early 20s up to like 30, early 30s. But we just tell us what your audience is. If it's K through 12, then tell us that. But if you do an application and you're only going to serve folks who are middle-aged, then I don't know why you would come in the youth door. You would actually need to come in another door that you're eligible to come in, just as a regular other entity applying for funds in that space. But normally it's K through 12, college-aged in that framework up until late 20s.
Thank you. Hi, we are planning to submit a youth programming application with the emphasis on traditional foods and food sovereignty. My question is, would that be a better fit within the youth program submission period or the traditional food and food sovereignty deadline?
It actually could come in either door, and I think that really is your call. It might depend on whether you were going to try to do the youth activities in relation to school or something. But you really could come in both doors, and I think it really is just your call about which door you come in.
It's really important to read the RFA in its full for both the youth and the general, because last year, for instance, in our RFA, we had an area for youth funding and funding for higher education and agricultural science. And we had some applications that applied for one area where the cap on what they could apply for was smaller. And when we were reviewing their project, we thought, wow, they should have applied for maybe ag science. They could have applied for more funding. So look at the amounts that you can apply for to see what suits your project the best.
Thank you. Can you apply for various special project funds for one larger project that is comprehensive in approach?
Yeah, but here's the deal. You should really think about if you have like an overarching effort that you're undertaking, you can apply for this part A under one particular avenue with NAAF and Part B. But please it gets really tricky when you do that, because most people don't do enough of a specific job to separate their budgets and separate their activities. So if you're not careful, it starts to look like you're coming in and trying to get funding for the same thing 3 different ways. And that's not appropriate. You really need to be very strategic about how you separate your budgets and separate your narratives, and really think about this overall effort and what the components are. And you could apply for multiple components, but you've got to make sure you separate your narrative and your budget so that it doesn't look like you're basically coming in for 3 different opportunities to get the same stuff done. Hope that makes sense.
Next question. Are letters of support beneficial?
Tony, you want to take that one?
Letters of support are optional, and as long letters of support and then your key personnel are grouped together in your application, and when we are reviewing, we have a team that sets up to review applications. Last year during that process, we found it very helpful for us to see who your key personnel was, more important so than letters of support. The letters of support were important if you in your project were stating that you were going to work with other organizations, just so that we knew that those that you intended to work for were aware that they were going to be part of this project and had support, community-wide support. So when it's attached to you're working with another person, yes, it's not so much in they're writing a reference of an individual on your staff or something that the organization has done in the past. That's what we found in last year's process. So, and especially right now, it's probably going to be harder to get information like that with so many governments and offices shut down. So there are certain parts of this application that are optional, and that's one of them.
If an application includes technical assistance and advocacy, would funds come from 2 pools?
It depends on which door you're coming in. If you apply as an advocacy thing, then why wouldn't you just go ahead and talk about technical assistance as a part of your advocacy? But if you're coming in, for instance, as a 501c3 and primarily you're going to be doing technical support plus advocacy, then I don't know why you would submit also under advocacy. I think, again, this is back to what Tony was saying. Read the application process, fairly fine-tooth comb, and kind of see where what you're trying to do fits. There's nothing that would prevent you from doing technical assistance and advocacy. The question really is, do you push it in through the advocacy avenue, or do you just go in as the type of entity that you are and just say you're going to speak to it twice? But I think it would be hard to be funded in both of those categories for the same exact it would be impossible to be funded for the same activity in 2 different categories. But
if you are a successful awardee in the 2020 general or youth, more so with the general, you'll have all the different areas that you can apply for within the application for the various different projects. But when you finally get an agreement for your grant, your contract, basically, it's for a single amount that comes from NAAF to you, and you parse it off, but you have to maintain the distinct nature of each project's budget when you're reporting to us, even though it will come to you in drawdown funds. You have to make sure that you keep a record that how much you use for advocacy or how much you use for traditional foods, and it stays in those buckets.
Okay, let's move to our next question. Do you have a rubric or policy that you're using to define in-kind/matching funds? This is in reference to the section that says special consideration will be given to projects who leverage.
Yeah, and here's, I wanted to actually speak to leverage too. Let me get to that question second. We actually have included in this application process one question when you're in the system, and it actually is asking all of our applicants if you would be interested in working with us to leverage your funds through other funders, public or private, that we are talking to a lot. We get a lot of calls from other organizations that don't work in Indian country but want to. And so we're asking all of the applicants this go around, which is a new question, whether you'd be interested in us, continuing to more specifically pull you in as a potential for receiving leveraged funds. That's a whole nother category. But they're in kind and matching. I'm going to have to literally have more detail of what if the person who's asking me that question is used to applying for federal grants, then they may be used to a very specific definition of in-kind or specific definition of matching under OMB circulars or particular federal funding authorities requirements. We are not federal. We can look to what you are presenting as in-kind, but we're not going to be stringent about what that means. In-kind has a pretty standard definition, and so does matching, but we're not going to get in the weeds with you like you would if you were applying for federal funding under some very specific definitions of what those things mean.
If we were trying to expand on a food sovereignty program, meaning expanding produce production, how is the must-show proof of increased credit ability for farmers and ranchers going to affect our application? We are not offering credit/financial education to farmers and ranchers since we don't have large native farms in our region.
Please take a look at the evaluation criteria, because we actually go into a little bit of detail in that part of the access to credit part of the evaluation criteria about what can be encompassed in assisting farmers and ranchers, native farmers and ranchers, around access to credit issues. There's so many things that you can do, business training, market plan training, risk analysis, credit repair. I mean, there's several different things that we talk about, and it's back towards the back of the RFA itself, and it's in the evaluation criteria section. So take a look at that, and if you still have questions, then just pose them to us, and we will, get more in detail if we need to, and we'll also include it in our FAQs. And I want to, before we go on, I want to go back to that in-kind and match. If you can provide in-kind, and if you can provide any kind of match, please go ahead and put it in. If you can't, it's not going to be held against you. If you actually have some that you can throw in, then we will take a nice look at that, because it adds value to the project itself. It is not required. I do want to make that clear.
Staying on this topic of in-kind, if our tribe has a federally negotiated rate of 25%, but the max indirect cost is 15%, can we include that difference of 10% as an in-kind donation to the project?
You would have to very specifically explain how you're going to delineate that in your budget.
What are indirect costs?
Indirect costs can mean there's some standard definitions in the grant world about what indirect costs mean. They can include things like rent and overhead and utilities, and in some programs it can go into actual services that are provided of an administrative nature that support particular functions. But here's the deal. NAAF does not NAAF is going to impose a 15% indirect cap. We're going to be as flexible as we can be on what is included in that indirect cap. So, for instance, if you're a 501c3 or a tribal government and you have a negotiated indirect rate, there's an elaborate process that you have to go through in order to prove up those indirect rates, because in the federal grant making arena, you in many cases can seek and get awarded your full indirect rate. That's not who we are. We're a private charitable trust, so we have greater flexibility. We just want, our philosophy is that in the indirect world, we want as much of the funds that we send to a project to go to the work on the ground with the direct impact of the producer and the farmer and rancher and the fisher as humanly possible. And that's our philosophy, is it's okay for you to have a negotiated indirect rate. This is our indirect limitation.
Thank you. We are a 2-year public community college that has a regular ag program with a college farm, but have not been working with Native American farmers. But we see a potential and would like to focus on this. There are already some people in the area who host a powwow on campus. Are we eligible to apply?
You're going to have to show demand. Do you have significant demand in your area to actually build a program? You would need to reflect that you're actually taking steps to build the program itself. What we have to do at NAAF is very specifically focus on the needs of Native farmers and ranchers and food people. So there are organizations that are non-Native controlled and non-Native led that can apply, but we're not really in the business of trying to support programs that might or might not ever get off the ground. I hope I'm not being too negative in this, but we really need to, if you're going to apply, you need to show us what your commitment is to serve our communities and be already taking steps to do so. I don't think the fund would necessarily be interested in funding something to support you to think about it. So if you've got any more questions, particularly in that area, please holler at me. There's a lot of organizations that are trying to work in this space of helping Native farmers and Native ag more and more. But we've got to really drill into that and make sure that we're not using the funds to support organizations that really aren't working in our communities.
Thank you, Janie. And if it's okay, I'd like to take the next question. So I'm going to read it out. I'm a consultant working on this grant for my tribe. Can I establish an account so that I can fully understand what is required, and then later my tribe's grant admin can establish an official account? I guess what I'm asking is if multiple accounts can be created for a said organization. So what I would like to tell you is that we prefer you only create one account, but we've already copied all of the questions that exist in the online system and added those as PDFs on our website. So if you visit our website and get to the 2020 Request for Applications page and scroll down, you're going to see something that says a yellow button that says Download RFA Overview and a red button that says Start Online Application. Below that is a list of headers, intro, eligibility, funding areas, etc. If you click on Downloads, it gives you a list of all supporting documentation for this application process. And the questions that exist in the online system are listed here as 2020 RFA Process-General and 2020 RFA Process-Youth. So if you just want to see what is this about, what are the questions, how heavy a lift is it, you don't have to create an account quite yet. You can go to our website, download these PDFs, and see what the questions and information we are requesting. And then you can have the official person create an account for your tribe. Janie, you want to add anything?
No, that's it.
All right, thank you. So next question, if we apply in June 2020, can we submit a separate proposal for youth programming or ag extension before September 2020?
Oh, sure. If you, like for instance, if you apply for, I'll qualify that a little bit. If you apply for youth by a youth programming activity by June, and then turn around and apply for another one by September, then the answer may be different, particularly if you're trying to get a second round of funding for the same thing. But if you apply for a totally different area and you come in by the June deadline and then turn around and wait till July or August or even September to apply for a youth programming, that's fine.
Thank you. Will this recording and the presentation be available on your website?
Yes. All of them will. All the webinars will be, give us a few minutes to download and get them pushed onto the website, but they'll all be available.
Okay. So we have a question. Again, I'm going to tackle this one. It says a PDF copy of the FAQ on the website is for 2019. Is it the same for 2020? Thank you for pointing that out. We're going to get that updated. It's the same questions, but we have a new one with a 2020 date. So appreciate that person. Next question. If we would like to apply for a project that includes adult programming and youth programming, should we submit 2 separate grant proposals?
I think I would. If it's not too much of a burden to you, it might be better to actually, you could still coordinate them when you're doing them, but it might be better to split them up and actually submit one for the youth and one for a parallel one for the adults. But have the youth come in the youth door. I hope that makes sense. And your older audience could come in just in one of the other categories.
When do you expect to announce award decisions?
As soon as humanly possible. We literally we're looking at summer. We've got to get this money moving quickly to just get it out and make sure that you all have resources to actually keep doing this work within your community. So we are all operating under a sense of urgency. We want to get the money out by early fall, and that's going to be a lift for us, but we want to do that. So we're going to be pushing hard to get that done.
Can you provide a sample copy of the grant agreement now?
Well, if you need one, just email us separately. I'm not sure why anyone would need one right now. If they're not selected yet, they would never use it. So just email us separately if you desire one, but I'm not sure that it's really relevant to the application process.
The RFA states on page 3 that funding may be used for general organizational support. Can you provide more information on that?
Can you repeat that, Carly?
The RFA states on page 3 that funding may be used for general organizational support. Can you provide more information?
Yeah, a lot of projects are not just project specific. A lot of organizations that submit have maybe one person. I'll just give an example. One person who 10% of their time is working on this project funded by NAAF, but 90% of their time is providing general support to the organization writ large. We are fine for you to actually pull in, folks into your project or costs into your project that would be of a more general nature, but we've got to have you to actually describe what they are. If you were to actually submit a proposal with a budget that was general operating support in a fairly large category of the budget, it will lead us to a whole array of questions about what you really mean, what is embedded in that general operational support. So this is all going to be really important for you as you're deciding how to put your project together, can you please be as specific as possible about what that support would be going towards?
When does the project period start, and when could we expect funding to drop?
Again, this relates to that previous question. We're going to try to get the funds out the door in early fall, no later than that, and we will start the project when we send the funds. So because of the timing of 2019, everything kind of rolled out the door right towards the end of the year, 1st of January. It was very rushed, and this year we wanted to build in enough time so that we could actually get the funds moving quicker in the year, but also have your start date as early as possible. As soon after we put the funds in your hands, get going.
Will more than one application per community/reservation be granted?
It could, yeah, absolutely.
I'm at a university. Do the PIs fill out the online application, or does the university business office do so? Normally, they submit proposals from everyone on campus. What has been done before?
That is really not our responsibility to determine. You have to decide that at your institution. We actually received applications, as I recall, last year from the PI, from the project lead. But some universities or educational institutions strictly prohibit that. They don't want it to be coming out of your university that way. And so you've got to follow your own rules internally. The project lead on a university-led project likely doesn't have the authority to actually sign the documents or be the authorizing official. Usually that is in a research office or some other business office of the university. Usually the faculty don't have the authority to sign a document, but please make sure that whoever is the authorizing official at your institution is actually identified, and there's a place for you to identify them in the software that you use to apply. But you've got to follow your own rules. Whoever signs the agreements at the very end to allow the funds to move has to be authorized to do that. And that's an internal thing at your end.
Thank you.
Check
Our
with your
Our tribal college currently has an extension program. We are looking to expand our programming and offer a certificate or degree program in agriculture. Is this the type of project eligible for funding under educational program area? For example, planning, faculty salary, etc.
Absolutely. We'd love to see it.
Can organizations apply for the youth programming grants in addition to the regular non-youth programming grants?
Can they do that? Yes.
Our organization is in the works of a workshop/project to promote sea otter harvest in Southeast Alaska. Are any of the funding programs with NAAF flexible enough to allow for funding for tribal citizens to have workshops on hunting, processing, tanning, tagging, and altering sea otter pellets?
Yes, 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 and yes. All of the above, yes.
Can these funds be used for community greenhouses? This greenhouse will be used for tribal community food and education for our youth.
Absolutely.
If we are a university extension but focusing on youth ag ed, what do we submit under?
I think that's going to be your call. Again, you would be eligible to come in under educational institution, but you could also come in under youth programming, just as an educational entity. So it really is your call.
Are Native Hawaiian 501c3 organizations eligible to apply for this funding?
Absolutely.
How quickly will the full list of 2019 grantees be published?
As soon as we can close out this webinar and approve the documents to be put up. We've been holding off to actually get this one launched, but also so that we could actually get all of the funds transferred and everything kind of tied together. And we are at that point, so look for it shortly.
We also have a 501c3 that works symbiotically with our 501c5. How should we apply?
If you come in as a 501c5, you will not be eligible. You can only use a 501c3 to come in unless you have to be one of the 4 types of eligible entities, and 501c5s are not eligible.
If we send in an application before the deadline, can we receive feedback on our proposal before review?
We don't normally do that because we want to give everyone a fair shot, and we don't want to actually we don't want to actually be unfair to all the other applicants, number one. Number two, if you'll remember, Tony actually said that most everybody came in, or maybe you said this, Carly, like the day of the final deadline. And so last year, there was no way we could have, even if we wanted to, but we just feel like it's the better move on our part to help you with technical issues and answering questions along those nature, but not to help you write your application. That would give you some special treatment. And we want this to be a fair process from the get-go to everybody.
Where can we find more information on what constitutes charitable and educational uses of funds?
Why don't we pull some we'll pull some definitions of that are in standard use in philanthropy, and we'll put it in our FAQs. So if you'll check back in a week or so, we'll have that. We'll just include that as one of our drop-down questions.
Does value added include agritourism?
Yes.
Can you define more precisely the 15% limitation mentioned? What does that include?
We'll also provide some more information on that. It's actually included in the budget narrative and in the sample budget and in the budget guidelines. If you actually look and pull up those documents, the description is there. But we'll be happy to put some more information about that in the FAQs. But we provided quite a bit already. Just pull down those documents. If you still have questions, then send us an email.
So we have 2 questions along the same thought train. It says, how can value-added projects proposed by tribes be charitable and/or educational?
I know quite a few projects that are value-added that have an educational component built into them. They may have a value-added commercial agriculture, bent to them, but they also bring in producers regularly and do trainings on food safety, or which is an educational piece, or a technical assistance piece. There's ways to build in that sort of activity as an add-on, basically, to your value-added investment. Quite often, they're literally symbiotically attached, because particularly if you're trying to do commercial activities with your value-added food products, the food safety requirements, the policy requirements can be pretty, labeling requirements can be pretty new territory for a lot of people, and the educational piece really helps your entire community kind of come up to speed to what needs to be done to get that value-added product kind of in a better place and more successful.
Thank you. Can an educational institution submit more than one proposal all in the same area, or does each proposal need to be in a different area?
I don't think they necessarily have to be in different areas, but you're going to have a difficult time separating them. And if you're not careful, they're going to look like multiple attempts to do the same project funded multiple ways. So you just got to be extremely careful how you talk about it and make sure it's extremely clear in your narrative and in your budgets.
Thank you. Does the online grant system allow for the uploading of tables, maps, photos, etc.?
You or Tony are going to have to answer that.
As long as it's in a PDF format, you can upload it. That's one of our requirements. And we do that because we heard from the fast track contractor who found it that they had some Word documents, and then when they were in the review process, they had accidentally altered these documents. So we require PDFs of every upload.
I will just add that if you're planning to do that, please reach out to us so we can talk about it, because right now for the project narrative section, there is no upload button. So if you wanted to upload a PDF of tables, maps, or photos, we would need to do that in another section. So please reach out to us so we can coordinate that.
Yeah, and Carly, let's go ahead and put an explanation of how to do that in our FAQs.
Okay. Next question. Can an application be used to buy cattle to grow a herd?
Here's the tricky part of that. If you're an eligible organization, it implies that you're actually not working on behalf of just one person. So if you are buying a herd for the purpose of having one person build a herd, then we will not be able to fund that. But if you are actually talking about charitable or educational activities that apply to multiple people, and the herd is a part of the backbone of the multiple farmer and rancher work, then we would absolutely entertain that application. But we can't directly fund anything that specifically is meant to benefit only one person. We cannot, it's in our trust agreement that we can't do loans to individuals, nor can we do grants that would only benefit an individual.
But whoever we approve, especially our CDFIs, they can give grants or loans directly to you. We can't.
Right. So if the organization were to seek money to be able to offer it to a group of individuals to help them build their herds, that's a whole nother question. But that's not the way the question was asked. So Tony is right. And so it's kind of a tricky needle to thread, but it is a prohibition in the trust agreement. So we have to be careful about it.
Thank you. Would exploration of ways that Native farmers and ranchers access markets, or supporting them to access markets, such as starting farmers markets or mobile markets, be eligible?
Absolutely. Well, and here's another comment I want to make about that. Just think right now about what COVID-19 is doing to market disruptions. And you know, a lot of producers around the country have built their business models around doing you know, on-farm things with their consumers, or partnering with the local school, and the school is closed. So I mean, there's all sorts of ways to get these things done, but accessing markets is really important right now, and understanding how the markets are moving and where they're moving to, and how you can keep up, and how the producers you work with can keep up and connect to new markets is probably more important now than it has been in a while.
Thank you. Can consultants who are non-tribal but experts in their field, who instruct or certify Native producers, be eligible for NAAF funding or an application?
No, consultants are normally LLCs or small businesses or individuals, and we don't fund individuals. Consultants are recognized in our budget narrative documents as being a line item that one of the eligible entities could actually decide that they wanted to fund in their budget, but we can't fund you as a consultant directly because that would violate about 3 different areas of our trust agreement.
Thank you. Are Native Hawaiians eligible to serve through NAAF projects?
Yes, yeah, absolutely.
Would the establishment of a native farmers market be an eligible activity? We just heard that answer.
Yeah.
At this time, I'd like to invite anybody with a lingering question to send it to us. Right now, I only have one more, so please get those questions in if you haven't. Janie, our tribe owns a ranch and the tribe runs a ranch as economic development, and we would like to buy more cows. We've been trying to grow a herd. Would that qualify?
Yeah, but it would, but make sure that you're not just seeking money to buy a herd. I mean, how is that charitable and educational in scope? That's what's going to be so important. A lot of the folks that have received funds in the past from us have those kind of quote unquote capital expenditures in their budget, but they wrap around with support to their individual native farmers and ranchers that are within their tribe. So just think about that, or fishers. Think about how that actually plays into the larger support for the native farming and ranching and fishing community writ large.
Thank you, Janie. Well, as we're waiting for any final questions, I just want to reiterate a few points. You can find all of this information on our website at www.nativeamericanagriculturefund.org/grants. When you get there, you'll navigate to a page called 2020 Requests for Applications. There's lots of information on that page. Please be sure to scroll down and to click through the different headings to see everything that's available. We encourage you to do your application online, but we also offer an opportunity to mail in a written application. Please reach out to us and our grants at nativeamericanagriculturefund.org or via our phone number 479-445-6226 to request an application packet. We have 4 more webinars scheduled. They all take place on the Thursday, starting at 2 p.m. Central Time. They will cover the same information, but there will always be a Q&A period, so you're able to ask different questions. The rest of those dates are April 23rd, May 7, May 21, and May 28th, with the final one on May 28th reserved for technical issues and last-minute questions only. We have one more question. Has anyone from Hawaii ever been funded? Yes. One
yes.
of my grantees is located in Hawaii from the 2019 round.
Yeah.
So yes.
So yes.
Yep. Finally, just want to repeat, we are here to assist throughout this process. Please reach out to us by phone or by email. Join us for another webinar. As Janie said, this webinar is recorded. As soon as we get off, we will download it, put it on our YouTube channel, and link it to our website. We're also going to update FAQs. So if you want to see this recording, please check back on Monday. Probably sooner, but I'm going to say Monday. And for our FAQs, Janie has asked to give us a week for us to update those. If you have any questions, please send them to us. Janie?
And thanks everybody for staying with us the whole time. I'm looking at attendees and there's still a solid few that are hanging on. So exactly what Carly said, Tony said, we just reiterate our entire team are very excited that we got this RFA out, and we're very excited that y'all are already in the system and getting started. And just reach out and let us answer any questions along the way. We try to be very responsive and turn things around as quickly as possible. So don't hesitate, but get your application started in the system and get to working on it. And hang in there. All of us are hanging in there together, and we're all on this COVID-19 journey together. And I just think now is the most important time we've ever confronted the need to really bolster our farmers and fishers and ranchers and our food systems. And we're excited that the fund is out here and able to do this work right now. Tony, do you want to send us off?
I just wanted to let everybody know, if you haven't already, please join our listserv, and all of our updates and important information and deadlines we send out through our listserv. So thank you, everyone.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.